Tonight's slate for MLB DFS is pretty much a big hot mess because this morning when we talked, there were two pitchers and three stacks I felt okay about. And even the stacks weren't that great. They were fine. But now it looks like one of those two pitchers may be dealing with pretty bad weather, and two of the stacks are also in bad weather. So I honestly have no idea if those games will play, which means we're going to have to dig to try to find some good plays for today. So let's talk now, try to find some gems and get you set for tonight in MLB DFS. Welcome on into the FanDuel Fantasy Q&A. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to get you set for tonight's allegedly 10-game slate. We'll see if it winds up being 10 because the weather is pretty gross. We'll talk about anything you want to talk about for today. We'll talk about the pitchers I'm considering, which stacks I would go to if the weather were perfect, whatever you want to talk about, value plays as well. We can talk about all that. All you have to do to ask your questions is go to wherever you're watching this stream, whether it be Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook. Go to the comments section, go to the chat function, and get your questions in. We'll take questions throughout the entire day, the next 25 minutes here, to get you set for MLB DFS. Now, let's take a look at the slate here because, again, it is kind of wonky. The reason we are in flux is because I don't really trust a lot of pitchers. I think that Glasnow, Buehler, and then Adam Wainwright all viable. The problem is that as we go to the weather report here, this is done by Kevin Roth over at RotoGrinders, we see a lot of games that have weather notes for tonight. That is not ideal. The Philadelphia versus Milwaukee game, I think that that's not of a huge interest for me personally, but the Dodgers-Cubs game, I like Buehler there, obviously, and I'm okay with stacking the Dodgers against Kyle Hendricks. We got a question about that on Facebook from Nick, which we'll talk about in just a second here. The Mets and the Cardinals, I like Wainwright there. That one sounds like it should be good to go from a playing perspective, so not super worried about that one. And then we have the Giants and the Rockies in Colorado. Colorado tends to be very patient. However, it's really, really gross for today. So a lot of the stuff that I felt okay about this morning is now up in the air, and I didn't really feel great about a lot of stuff to begin with. So it's a rough slate for sure. So let's take some questions here from Nick. What's wrong with Kyle Hendricks? Do you start him tonight? Supposed to rain, maybe late start. I would not touch him for DFS. I would not consider him. I would never go anywhere near him just because the rough start is very... It seems sustainable, like in a not great way, but also he's facing the Dodgers. So for DFS, you do not consider Kyle Hendricks. If we get the all clear on weather for that game, I would consider stacking against him because when you look at the advanced numbers against Hendricks so far this year, they're all pretty rough. And these are things that stabilize quickly. The results, like the ERA, it's like 7 point something. You don't worry about that. That's a small sample. That doesn't matter. But the quickly stabilizing numbers, like Skill Interactive ERA at 4.57, up a half run from last year. His strikeout rate's down, walk rate way up, ground ball rate down about 15 percentage points. His barrel percentage is up a lot, and he's not getting whiffs. So all of those numbers say that the rough start Hendricks has had so far is probably going to stick around. He's had some start against like teams like Pittsburgh in there as well. The first one was against Pittsburgh. Since then, he also had Milwaukee twice. He's only had two tough matchups, and they're both against Atlanta, and both of them didn't go very well. So if we get all clear with weather for that game between the Cubs and the Dodgers, I think you should stack the Dodgers. It is risky because, I mean, Hendricks is a good pitcher. Like, he's a very good pitcher. He's not pitching well right now. Long term, he will get better. But for right now, until I see him get better, I'm okay stacking the Dodgers. So if we get the all clear for weather in that game, I will be stacking the Dodgers for tonight. However, as you can see here, doesn't look great. As Kevin mentioned in his recap over on RotoGrinders, says that the storm's going to get there right around the time of first pitch, which is not ideal. Also not ideal for Walker Buehler as our number 2 pitcher. So it's rough all around. So don't use Kyle Hendricks and stack against him if we get the all clear for weather. Jeremiah, do you trust Kenta Maeda for tonight? No, not really. It's tough because there aren't a lot of pitches I want to use. So Maeda so far, 18% strikeout rate. He is using his slider a lot, and that's one thing you can look to is to see, okay, are they using their really good pitch? And with Maeda, he's using his good pitch. He's using that slider a lot. But he's not going super deep into games. I believe the velocity may have been down on Kenta as well. Let's pull up the numbers here on Maeda so far this year. And we're going to scroll down to the pitch info and take a look at the velocity, but also the usage. Just see what he's been doing so far. Actually, the velocity is not too bad, at least in the four-seam fastball. Velocity looks okay, so that's good. Let's scroll down to the plate discipline numbers, see what his CSW is. So CSW is down quite a lot, which means he's just not getting as many strikes as you would hope. That's a concern because his strikeout rate is quite low. Now, based on that CSW percentage, you would expect his strikeout rate to come up probably to somewhere, if I had to guesstimate, around like 22 or so percent. But 22% is not enough when we have Tyler Glasnow on this slate with a 39% strikeout rate. So I'm pretty not into Maeda. It's a great matchup. He's at home. We love that for sure. He'd probably pop up at some point after we get behind, if we take off Buehler and Wainwright because of weather. Eventually we are going to get to Kenta Maeda, but I just don't think I want to do it. I think I'd rather just, limit my player pool, build around the pitchers I actually do want to use, and do that instead. So no Jeremiah, I don't trust him. I think that it could go fine because he's a good pitcher, kind of like Hendricks. You expect him to get better as things go along, and it's a good matchup too, but there's not enough there for me to feel confident in the rebound coming tonight specifically. So personally, not super into Kenta Maeda. Michael, which Giants are at risk of being Kapler? Every single person on the Giants, because he's there. So I think the way that I look at this is which ones are at the least risk of being Kaplered, and I think we got a good list. Let's. I think the way to judge this, we are going to go to roster resource over on Fangraphs. We're going to click on the San Francisco Giants. We're going to go here. What we're going to do is look at the righties who face righties and the lefties who face lefties. Those are generally going to be the batters you can trust most within this Giants team because it means that they're not platoon dependent. So Tommy LaStella, last time I faced a lefty, not in there, not in against lefty. He leaves early during games. Tommy LaStella also kind of banged up, I believe. I think he left yesterday's game early. He is not safe. I do not want to use Tommy LaStella in DFS as a result of that. Mike Tauchman is safe because last time they faced a lefty, he hit eighth, but he was in the lineup. He's stayed in the game the entire time he's played so far. So Mike Tauchman, not at risk of being Kaplered. Buster Posey, he's a righty who faces righties. He's good to go. Brandon Belt does occasionally leave games early. However, they've had some injuries recently. He's a good hitter overall, and he has been playing against lefties. Brandon Belt, pretty safe against that. Alex Dickerson doesn't tend to face lefties. Again, benefits with Yastrzemski being out because it's one less guy they can turn to. He wouldn't really matter for Dickerson specifically, but it does lower their depth, so it does matter to an extent. I don't think Dickerson is very safe. He tends to leave games early as well. If Longoria is starting, he tends to be pretty safe. Crawford tends to be safe because of the defense. So the guys I would flag as being especially not safe, Michael, are LaStella and Dickerson. With that said, there's nobody who's truly, truly, truly safe because Gabe Kapler, he plays things in an intelligent way, and he doesn't want to put his guys in bad positions. That's great for him, great for the Giants, bad for us. So nobody is safe. Everyone's at risk, but the guys who are least risky, I would say Tauchman, Posey, Belt, Longoria, Crawford be the main guys I would turn to there. Marcus Semien or Francisco Lindor. I'm probably going to wind up going Semien here because I know the Blue Jays are one of the places I would turn. I talked about how a lot of the stacks are being taken off the table. Blue Jays are still in play because there's no real weather concerns there. The temperature in Oakland is actually a bit warmer today, 67 degrees. That is higher than it usually is. So that does help as well. And I think the Blue Jays are okay. Frankie Montas allowing a lot of balls in play, a lot of hard contact right now. That's an ideal formula. And facing the Blue Jays, who do a lot of good stuff when they put the ball in play. So I think that Semien, just because I prefer stacking the Blue Jays over stacking the Mets, is inherently going to be the guy I choose there. Also, it's worth mentioning, I like Adam Wainwright quite a bit. I didn't talk a lot about him because that game is one of the weather risks, but Wainwright has looked pretty good so far this year. As you can see, these are the numbers for him for this year, 3.29 skill interactive ERA. He has a 26% strikeout rate, 5% walk rate. All those numbers really, really good across the board. You can see the matchup is kind of scary. That's why I'm not overly enthusiastic about the Mets either, but there's still enough there where I feel fine about it. So I think that for me, I would be going with I'd rather use Wainwright as a pitcher than use guys facing him. So between Semien and Lindor, I am going Semien by a pretty wide margin. As far as pitching goes today, it is Glasnow just kind of at the top. 39% strikeout rate. The Angels, a tough matchup for sure, but if we take Buehler out of the equation, which I don't know if you necessarily have to take him out of the equation fully, just because, it could still wind up being fine, but there is risk there with the weather. So if you take him out of the equation, because I think that Buehler and Glasnow are kind of in the same tier, Glasnow becomes multiple tiers above everybody else from a strikeout rate perspective. So I think the Glasnow, despite a not great matchup, you still kind of use him because pitching quality matters a lot too. And Glasnow as a pitcher, from a talent perspective, is well above everybody else on this slate. So I think you kind of just go Glasnow and kind of see what happens there. I think that if we do wind up if the weather doesn't get better, and Kevin Roth, Rotogrinders, tends to do an update around like 5:30 Eastern or so to give the final update on what the weather looks like. If we don't get a better update from one of those games, I think it might be a night where you just go like single entry and go Glasnow for your single entry lineups. And again, you can like do multiple different single entry lineups in different contests, but I think for me, I'd rather just go Glasnow and try to limit stuff for tonight because it's a really messy slate across the board. I don't like dealing with like the really rocky weather that we have. Not a lot of options I feel tremendous about from either a stacking or a pitching perspective outside of him. So it's kind of one of those nights where I want to pick my one pitcher, pick my two stacks, cash out because it's just not a fun slate across the board. If we're trying to identify other pitchers, like let's say you are steadfastly against Glasnow for some reason, totally fine. I would go to Buehler 2 and then Wainwright 3. If we lose those guys, it gets pretty grim. I think that maybe you could justify taking a chance on Daniel Lynch. He's coming from the alternate site. This is going to be his big league debut. The reason I'm not into Lynch before lopping off everybody is that I don't know what his pitch count will be because there were not any reports. Like a lot of times when there's a guy at the alternate site, you can get reports on how many pitches they threw in a simulated game and stuff like that. I have not seen those for Lynch, so I don't know how long he'll be able to go. That means that I can't feel very confident in him. However, when we last had minor league seasons back in 2019, good strikeout numbers, not great. They were better back in 2018, the first year after his draft year. A lot of swings and misses. Looked pretty good in rookie ball 2 years ago as well, but he's facing Cleveland. Cleveland's had a really rough year so far. They had the no-hitter against Rodon. They're not a high strikeout team, which is, again, why I'm not super enthusiastic here, but he would probably be the next guy up just because Cleveland probably doesn't know what he's going to be doing all that much. He didn't look great during spring training. He actually got rocked in a couple of starts, but I think that that's kind of where we're at is – looking at guys in that mold who could justifiably have a big day. Maybe you go Steven Matz facing the A's. Let's look at him here and see what he's been doing. Got off to a really hot start this year, but has cooled off a bit since then. A's do strike out a bit. That could be enough to bump Matz up to be a consideration. 3.94 skill interactive ERA, 24% strikeout rate. Not a ton of whiffs. Let's see what the CSW percentage is. For Steven Matz, it is 31.2%, so that's a little bit above average, so we can definitely take that for sure. Let's see other stuff here on Matz, see what he has been doing for us recently. Lynch is not available on FanDuel. Disappointing. Okay, so I guess we're not going Daniel Lynch. We tried. Thank you, Michael. Oh, well, we gave it a shot. Tried to get a little weird with Daniel Lynch. Guess it's not going to happen, so maybe next start. Steven Matz, 7 strikeouts against Tampa Bay. They're a high strikeout team. Texas is a super high strikeout team. So he hasn't really done much against the outrageously high strikeout teams. I don't really want to use him, which again is why I'd rather just go with Glasnow and cash out after that. But I don't know, man. It's a rough slate for sure. So to me, I feel like Glasnow is kind of the one guy you can actually have confidence in. If any of you have others you'd like me to look into who you think, okay, I looked into We talked about Kenta Maeda already. If you want to talk about Aaron Savali or something like that, hit me up in the comments section on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or Twitter. If there's someone you're thinking about using a pitcher for tonight, let me know. But I think for me, it's kind of just about Glass now if we can't use Buehler and Wainwright. I would feel okay using Wainwright based on the way the forecast currently looks there. It seems like he's more safe than Buehler. So I think that if you are pivoting, I would just go to Wainwright and risk it with the weather because you're not going there in cash games. You're going with Glass now in cash games. But I think overall it really is Glass now one. I mean, Buehler and then Wainwright, but then a lot of question marks after that. Let's talk about some offenses here, given that we haven't really talked about them as of yet. So we do have the Padres. They're one of the teams I mentioned this morning as being a potential option. Robert asked about Savali, so we'll get to him in a second. Let's talk about the Padres here first. They're facing Tyler Anderson. Anderson looked okay so far this year, 3.92 skill attractive ERA. Definitely a good number. We can get behind that. 24% strikeout rate, 7% walk rate. He doesn't profile as being the type of guy we typically stack against. The reason I'd be okay using bats against him here is because I'm not sure that strikeout rate sticks. If that strikeout rate comes down, he's letting up some hard contact, not getting ground balls. That could lead to some issues in a pretty big hurry. As you can see here, he's getting whiffs. So maybe it's not totally fluky that the strikeout number is up for Anderson. He's leaning a lot on a cutter. So maybe he's just, untap something by doing that. But I still feel like we could potentially stack against him. The Padres did see him this one time. Only 2 strikeouts in that game. They didn't do a whole lot from a batted ball perspective in that one. They did have 8 hard hit balls, 40 or 95 plus miles per hour off the bat. Okay, so I think that that's although he allowed just 2 or 1 and run there and got didn't allow a ton of hard contact. There was enough there where I still feel good using him. So I would say the Padres probably the top stack as of now. I think that if we can get clearance to use the Giants, that'd be good going there. But again, weather concerns there. Now, I missed Mateo's question earlier. My bad, Mateo. Would you use bats versus Quintana? I don't know. Looking at the numbers here, a high walk rate and a high strikeout rate, that's kind of concerning. The Rays strike out a lot as well. The problem is I don't have a lot of great alternatives, and Quintana's letting up base runners. His ERA is terrible, which means, the results have not been good. I believe he's gotten a lot of ground balls this year. I do want to double check that, though, because, again, this happened at 3:30 where they decided to scratch Shohei Ohtani. But, yeah, a lot of ground balls in 4 starts. Typically been a guy who's pretty decent with contact suppression. So I would say they're not a priority, Mateo, but they're fine because there aren't a lot of good alternatives. So I'd say definitely the Padres above them. And if we get clearance on the Giants above them, if we get clearance on the Rockies as well. And then if we get clearance on the Dodgers, I'd put them above them, but then maybe the Rays be after that just because Quintana has gotten knocked around quite a bit. A lot of hard contact against him. His expected ERA is 5.70. Even that's pretty high. So I would be okay going with the Rays, just a little bit lower than the other stacks you mentioned. And then Mateo likes the Twins lefties against Dane Dunning. So let's look at the platoon splits here for Dunning. I would note that Dunning is not going to be in there very long. He tends to go around 70-ish pitches and then dives, which means you're facing a lot of relievers after that. And we don't tend to get a lot of points for DFS off of relievers. But just for funsies, let's look into the splits here for Dunning and look at his career numbers because we want a larger sample. And okay, so against lefties, Dunning has a 22% strikeout rate, 10% walk rate, and does let up some hard contact. So it's a positive. The batted ball number is definitely better for lefties. So maybe you could go there. The reason that I'm not super enthused about doing it is that if you look at his numbers this year, good number of strikeouts for Dunning, not a lot of walks, keeping the ball on the ground, not letting up a lot of barrels. They're letting him go in shorter bursts. They're letting him go out there, kind of, run his heat out there, use his slider a decent amount, and then taking him out after 70 or so pitches. That's seeming to maximize what he does and keeping the bad stuff from his profile from really getting out of hand. So for that reason, I'm not super anxious to use the Twins. But I would say, again, like this is a really rough slate, and there aren't a lot of surefire options. So if you're going to go there, I think the Twins lefties are fine. They're just not ones I'd be like actively seeking out. Let's check out the Rangers bullpen here and see what we're dealing with after Dunning comes out of the game, because if they're just hideous, then that would definitely bump up the batters. For the Twins here, the Rangers bullpen, let's go to advanced, see what they're doing there. All righty. So the Rangers bullpen has a 3.72 skill interactive ERA, 24% strikeout rate, 7% walk rate. They've been pretty good so far this year. Not terrible by any means. Let's go to the batted ball data against them. And text. Aha. They have allowed a 6.6% barrel rate. Okay, so they've not been bad. So I don't know. I think it's a fine situation to go at, but I'm not really seeking it out just because Dunning's been pretty good overall. Twins lefties get downgraded because target field is not great for left-handed bats, and that adds up to be just not great. I'd probably go with the Rays righties over the Twins lefties for today. Okay, so let's talk about Aaron Savali. I don't like Savali because he doesn't get enough strikeouts. If we look at, these are his numbers from this year, and he made some changes. He's been a different pitcher. Okay, so he changed his changeup to be a split change. His sinker usage is down, more sliders. So change his changeup, more sliders, fewer sinkers, very different pitcher than what he was last year. But it hasn't led to a lot of strikeouts. 21% strike rate for Savali so far this year, facing the Royals, who are not a super high strikeout team. They've been pretty good this year. Their overall numbers, if we look since the start of last year, are not ideal, especially because Benintendi was really rough. But, they're not a bad offense. They're not one I actively want to target. He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. So that's why I'm not really into him. He's also not like that much lower salaried than Glasnow, because he is 9.5. Glasnow is 10.8. I'd rather just get up to Glasnow there. So that's why I'm not really into Savali. He could wind up being really, one of the higher scoring pitchers tonight, just because there aren't a lot of good competition outside of Glasnow. Like if Glasnow gets rocked, maybe Savali winds up being the highest scoring pitcher for tonight. But I'd rather take swipes at guys like Adam Wainwright, Buehler if the weather is okay, and others, just because like they get strikeouts and Savali really doesn't. That's a differentiator for me, and that's why I don't really necessarily want to go there. I'd also mention, if you're looking at the sheet over here, I don't know if Eric Swanson for sure is starting for the Mariners. Sounds like it'll be a bullpen game, but they called him up from the alternate site yesterday, and he didn't pitch in yesterday's game, so it seems like he should be good to go, or he'll probably be the starter. For the Mets, I'm kind of assuming it'll be Sean Reed-Foley. I've not seen an announcement on that as of yet. It could be Joey Lucchesi, because Lucchesi's on the taxi squad, so he's kind of bouncing around. It could be someone who gets called up for this game. But I honestly don't know. So we're kind of working with just like, I'm looking at full bullpen type games. And a full bullpen to me is, okay, so it is Joey Lucchesi. They've actually announced it. Okay, so Joey Lucchesi starting here for the Mets. Let's pull up Lucchesi's numbers since I have Sean Reed-Foley's on there and see what Lucchesi's done. In general, for guys at the alternate site, that tends to be a negative sign that they're not super high on him. So in limited samples so far this year, a lot of strikeouts across only 8 innings, but that's noteworthy. Let's see what his pitch stuff is looking like in that time to see if he's doing anything different here. So the velocity on he doesn't use a four-seamer. Okay, so the velocity on the sinker is the highest it's ever been. Changeup velocity is actually not that high, so that means the differential between his sinker and his changeup has gotten bigger. That's kind of interesting. Okay, so Lucchesi got some strikeouts. Maybe we can see why, given that the velocity was higher. I'm not going to use him as a pitcher. Do not use him as a pitcher. I have no idea what his length is. No idea on that. So I'm not going to use him as a pitcher, but I'm also not really itchy. I just don't like the Cardinals' offense that much either. So I would say probably just an avoid situation overall. Jonathan, who do you think is the best shortstop I can get? Let's pull up the old player pool over here and check that out. Fernando Tatis Jr., best shortstop on the slate by a wide margin. Facing a lefty, he's good at baseball. Breaking news there. So it's going to be Tatis by a wide margin. I would say if Corey Seager plays, he'd be the best shortstop or one of the better shortstops as well. if you're looking for like a lower salaried shortstop, I believe there was one that was like a super value. We were talking about this morning. Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. Well, either way, I would say if you're looking for just the best shortstop available, you want Tatis or Seager if that game is good to go. Jeremiah, what app is this? Okay, so I was over on Fangraphs.com. I believe that's one I was on when you asked that, Jeremiah. So go to Fangraphs.com. You can type in a player name, and then they have a lot of different data. The stuff that I look at for the most part is I will go to a player's game log. I will change this to be, for Lucchesi, it's not going to be great. Let's actually let's go to Glass now because it's easier to see here. Let's go to Tyler Glass now over on Fangraphs. Click the game log here. And what we're going to see here is we're going to go, first thing I do, check out the how many pitches he's thrown. You see that here. Then I'm going to go to see what he did last year to this year so I can see what kind of changes they have made from last year to this year. When we do that for Glassdoor, we're going to see that he's throwing a slider now, which he was not previously. So that means to me, I want to focus on just 2021 data. 2021 data looks pretty similar, the pitch usage. So that means I can go to his season-long stats. Cool thing about Fangraphs is you can actually customize these leaderboards. So I have the data I want up here and the numbers I want to see first when I pull up a page. For Glass now, I see a 39% strikeout rate, 2.50 skill interactive ERA, not a ton of barrels against, like he did let us some hard contact in that Toronto game, but it's a little dicey there, but a lot of whiffs. So Jeremiah, I would say go to Fangraphs, tinker around, play the game logs, look at the pitch info, pitch mix stuff, and just kind of familiarize yourself with their site, because it's definitely the one that I lean on most when doing my research for each day. That is all the time that we have for today here on the FanDuel Fantasy Q&A. Again, kind of a murky slate, so I'm going to wish you good luck. I would say, though, again, make sure you check out the Roto Grinders weather page. Kevin Roth does a great job. He's a meteorologist. He knows this stuff way better than I do. Trust his word over mine with regards to whether these games will play. Really recommend rotogrinders.com and checking out the weather section there so you can have an idea of which games will play, which ones are risky, and which ones we can feel good about for sure. I'll be back again tomorrow with the solo shot at 9 a.m. That's on the FanDuel YouTube page and also on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Tomorrow's Q&A, we have Brandon Gagula kicking things off at 3:30 p.m. talking about the Wells Fargo Championship. I will join him at 4 p.m. to go through Tuesday's slate of MLB DFS. It is a lot better slate. Jacob DeGrom's tomorrow, so we can feel better about that. Make sure you tune in tomorrow and make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you tonight. We're probably going to need it. Fingers crossed everything plays. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. This has been the FanDuel Fantasy Q&A.